Yeah, we can see the screen.
All right. So, hello everybody. My name is Jehad Mohamed, and today essentially we are gonna have a talk slash workshop around what UX is, and we'll kind of deep dive into it. What exactly UX is, and what do UX designers do for a living, and so I'll talk more about it. Uh, so let's just start with I'll introduce myself. So I myself graduated from Sahyadri. I was also part of SOSC and the Mozilla Campus Club. So I currently work at Beacon Stack. It is a QR code management platform. And I graduated as an engineer from Sahyadri, CSE engineer. I pursued my career in like UX design, and like now I'm a lead product designer at Beacon Stack. And so I'm leading my own design team at Beacon Stack, and it's a product company. I'll talk more about it later. But essentially, that is pretty much all about me, engineer who became a designer. And yeah, I'm a otaku also. So just putting it out there. So about today's session, the focus will be initially on what UX is and what UX designers do. But then I will deep dive into two topics which, as engineers and designers, both should know about. One is design systems, other one is the a concept known as DAS. I'll explain that. And then we'll try out some like the workshop part of it. We'll try out making something on Figma. So at any point, if you have questions, you can ask on the YouTube live stream, which I am checking, or you can let Adib know, who is essentially the moderator, and he'll ask me on the call. So let's get started with the first, the big question: what UX essentially is. And when people talk about UX, there are many different definitions you'll find out there, but something that everyone kind of agrees upon is that it is the how a user or a person feels when they interact with anything. And when I say anything, it can be anything like a product or an app, a website. It can even be like a physical product, how a person interacts with anything from a token system to a app on your mobile or any service. So the entire this thing, the umbrella of this, the how you feel when you interact with something is called user experience. And generally, you must have felt this when like you're using certain apps. It's easy to use, it looks good, you don't have problems while using it, it solves like it's very you're comfortable using it, and that means it has a good user experience. A lot of these examples would be one, the famous apps which are out there, right? Instagram, Swiggy, like any of these apps. I mean, it is easy to use for you as a user, right? But compared to that, let's say a video website where you find your results and all that. The experience is terrible, right? Compared to the type of experience good apps have on your phone. So the user experience is essentially how you would feel when you use something, and that entire umbrella term is called UX. So let's move to the next thing, which is what does a UX designer do? Which essentially it breaks down into four main things. I have made it kind of like I have really dumbed it down, but I'll explain each of these. So first one is make it easy. So whatever app you have, if it is too complex or too hard to use, one of the jobs of a UX designer is to make sure whatever the solution I am coming up with, it is usable and it is easy. The whole process of doing it is easy. And second thing, make it pretty. So make it pretty is a very ambiguous term, but the idea here is make it visually look good. So whether it comes to how a button looks or what fonts to use, what colors to use, that also comes under the purview of a UX designer. Third thing, which is the most important thing, is make it useful. So one of the tasks a UX designer will have under his umbrella is to understand what the user requires from the platform. So they'll do things like interviews, surveys, and they'll try to make the app grow towards the user needs. Which means, supposing, let's say, for example, one of the changes in Swiggy recently is the option to like sort by distance, like like delivery time, right? And that happened because like Swiggy designers, they did research asking people what would they need, and they wanted to know, like, I want to know, like, which will reach fastest to me out of all the options, and things like that. So you keep on adding features which users want. So making anything more useful is something that a UX designer does. And finally, make it accessible. So when I say make it accessible to everyone, I mean, there are two aspects to this. One is, when you're designing anything, you have to make sure it is not too complex, so that people who are not technically abled. So let's say that if there is a app and it's too complex to use, you need to have like good technical knowledge to use that app. Less people can use it, right? Because not everyone is very tech savvy. So designers, one of the jobs they have to do is to make sure that more and more people can use it, so make it more accessible to a lot of people. That is one aspect. Other aspect is accessibility when it comes to disability, which means something like using proper colors and everything. So almost 10 to 15% of the whole population has some level of color blindness or visual impairment. Now the question is, like, what can you, like, you can, there are some exercises which you can do in design, like when you design UX or make apps and websites, which help people with these disabilities also to use the app. So this also comes under that umbrella. So the 4 points, I'll go over it again: making something easy to use, making it look good, which is making it pretty, making it useful, which means it solves the user problem, the reason why the person came to the app, the website, or that solution. It should solve the people's problem. And finally, making it accessible, that everyone can kind of use it. The last one is not always possible, because sometimes, let's say you're making an app for other businesses and it's a complex app, maybe it's related to coding or something like that. So you can't hit every, like, you can't make it accessible to everyone. But what designers try to do is try their best to make sure, like, most of the people who they can reach can use it. So that covers essentially what UX designers do from a effect standpoint. Now, so there's a term now, UI and UX, which generally people use it together. And people generally have this presumption that uh, UI, which is user interface, has to do with the colors of buttons, the typography. Typography means fonts, design patterns, animations of buttons. So if you consider things like text field and all, like next time you on any UI screen or any app screen, when you click on anything like a hover state or a click state, you'll notice there are minor animations and things like that. Like maybe the text is moving or maybe the color changes. So these small animations also come as a part of this micro interactions. All this comes in under UI, whereas the UX part of it, uh, it has user research, which is finding out what are the user needs, user testing, which is essentially like once you have a let's say a prototype or something, testing it with the user and seeing the acceptance testing. Information architecture, they are more on the non UI design part of it. But the issue, what people don't realize is the UI and UX are not two different things, because the whole point is, the reality is, UI is essentially a part of UX. And generally speaking, when you eventually create UI screens, right, they are an end result of research and everything you've done, which is a part of the whole UX process. So that's why I, in the starting, have named the whole presentation as diving into UX, because essentially UI is a huge part of UX, but UX has much more things which have little to do with the UI. So as I said before,
Jehad,
yes,
could you like wait for a minute? Just like we have some issues going on with the like mic part. Just for like 1 minute, could you like pause for once?
yeah,
Okay, sure. Thanks a lot, man.
yeah.
Yes, yes, actually. With more layout. It's not. Instinctive inside of this layout. It's in this. Which is good. Nothing but it. Yeah, Jehad, you can continue now.
All right. So I'll continue. Basically, what I'm saying is it's not UX versus UI always, because the idea being that UI is a part of the whole UX process. And so, did you say anything? Nothing.
No, 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 nothing.
Nothing. Right? Okay. All right. So let's talk about why UX has been a growing field, and there's certainly a huge demand in the market around UX. And a major reason is, see, when you talk about UX, you're talking about usability of a product, right? Or a service or any uh, thing out there. What happens is, with better UX, people tend to use that app or that website or that product more, and that converts into a lot of customers over time, and that gives more money to the business. So although you might have a very powerful tool, let's say as an engineer you're starting your own startup and you have a very powerful tool out there, if it is too complex to use and if it is not usable enough, it's not easy to use, it's not usable for the end user, no one is going to pay for it. So what UX essentially impacts businesses is, it directly gives them more customers and more loyal customers over time, and that converts into money. And that's why like UX essentially pays more than other fields of design right now in the whole software industry. But that is why it's very important for also us as engineers to understand like why UX is important, because it is, as engineers we take UX screens which these UX designers, after thought, a lot of thought process, they'll come up with the final designs and we have to translate that into code. So by the way, at any time if you have questions about anything I'm asking, you can ask Adib or ask in the group chat. I'll answer it during this thing itself. So when it comes to UX designers, so there's a two categories of it, two main categories. One is known as a generalist, one is known as a specialist. It's very much like doctors, how we have a general physician who kind of knows a little bit of everything, and if you have any problems which are like, if he can't solve it with a, like, he sends to a specialist, right? So similar to that, also UX designers come in two types. One is a generalist, one is a specialist. Specialists, they focus on certain aspects of UX design and they work generally on that, and they kind of know everything there is to know about that particular field. A generalist will know a little bit of everything. So each of them have their own ups and downs. But a generalist generally, although they do not have much information, like deep knowledge about everything, they make good managers because they know a little bit of everything and they can work across with different designers at a time. So they make good managers. Specialists, on the other hand, they know what they know some like deeply about a certain field. So as freelancers, they generally like even as full-time employees, but as freelancers, they really like to work with a company for like 2 3 months, make a lot of money doing that, and then they jump from company to company once they have solved the company's issues with that particular aspect of it. But again, specialists also, if you see in bigger companies, specialists tend to work full time. But in generally in startups, in India especially, people prefer generalists to start with, because like, you know, the person is basically jack of all trades, right? So a few of the type of specializations which people have under UX design, so I'll go over them. First one is design systems. I'll talk more about this in detail in some time, but the idea here you should know is reusable components and reusable design, where it you create a button and you can reuse that button again and again in your designs without having to code it again from scratch or even design it from scratch. And that the entire I would say the whole system is something that engineers really need to learn, which I think, you know, video doesn't teach about all this. But then if you are looking for a career in web especially, or even let's say app development, it really helps to know some of the major design systems out there. So I'll explain this going forward, but I'll jump into the other ones and try to explain what they do. UX research. So UX researchers are generally people who try to find out what are the needs of the users. So they'll do things like surveys, interviews, uh, user acceptance testing, and they try to collect all the information from the users and try to convert those into business goals and explain that to the, let's say, the other UX designers who are designing the screens and everything. So this is also a very important part of the entire UX process, and some people like to specialize in the only the research part. So what happens here is people people who are not so, let's say, creatively inclined, let's say if maybe you think you don't have the chops for like creative design, but you still want to become a UX designer. UX researcher is a very good task because it's all to do with quantifiable numbers and interviews. You should be more on the like, you should have like the confidence to speak with people, with users, with stakeholders. It is more on that side than have to, like, you know, making screens, making beautiful things. So there is that aspect of the UX designer process also. Then we have UX writing, which is an up and coming field, which essentially the simple thing is text on UI screens, right? The like text, I mean, like, let's say on the button, if it says click here, things like that. There's a whole field, and there's a job role known as a UX writer, where people specialize in just writing special text which converts more. When I say converts more, it means people tend to click on it more, people tend to understand it better, and things like that. So a very good example is from Google's so before, in Google had explained how they use UX writers in one of their presentations. So the example they gave was, so when you search for a hotel room, right, before it used to show, the button used to be check availability, and when you used to click, like, they had very few clicks on that button. But when they changed the text to book a room, right, the number of clicks increased by 30%. What that means is a simple text in a UI screen can change how the UI is perceived. And because of that, there are specialists out there who are very good at UX writing. So what they do is they go to companies, they join companies as a UX writer, and their entire task is just to make sure the UX, the copy or the text on the UI screens is follows the norm and, you know, is best out there. And finally, we have VUX and XRUX, which is essentially you know, AR, VR, and voice interface. So they are UX designers who work on these as well. When I say voice interface, I mean more like on the lines of Alexa and Google Home and Siri, where, you know, it's conversational UX. AR, VR, I mean, you must be familiar with as the Oculus. There are games and there are applications on the Oculus or other VR headsets. AR experiences, again, there are many apps out there which use the AR experience. So they are design UX designers who specialize with only these kind of products and services. And these are some of the, I would say, core specialists which are out there. There are more fields, but a generalist would know a little bit of everything, but specialist would be like would have deep knowledge about each of these. So I mentioned design systems. Now, design systems is something I wanted to really talk about specifically, because as engineers, this really helps you build apps and websites very easily. And if you're a designer also, it helps you build designs for like without making everything from scratch. So first I'll try to explain what a design system is. It is essentially a collection of style guides, components, and patterns. What that means is it is like a set of rules which you have assigned. Something like a button should look like this, it should have this color, it should have this color text, uh, a slider should look like this. So you already define what each component, let's say something like text field, buttons, graphs, progress bars, all of these, how they look like, you already define in the system, and you create it once. Once you create it, what you do is, instead of creating it from scratch again and again, you can use that same instance. Meaning, as an engineer, when you code something, right? So the example is very similar to how functions are there in code, where you write the code within a function only once, but you call the function and it calls the entire block of code, right? When you call the function. So similar to that, in design systems, you define what a button is. You design a button, you decide the colors, you decide everything. But when you call a button, you don't have to design the button from scratch every single time. You just have to call a button and it calls that specific button where you had designed it the first time. And the usage of this is a lot of the big companies, right? So it's, let's say, like you're an IBM, there are thousands of designers, thousands of engineers, and every person, imagine they started making their own buttons. The entire products would look very different from each other, right? So what they do is they have a design system in place. They have defined, see, a button should look like this, use this button. So all you need to do is, essentially, if you're writing code, you need to copy paste the code. If you're designing, you have to drag and drop the design, and you have essentially a button. So you can focus on the UX aspect of it, and the UI part is taken care of in big companies. And this creates a level of consistency, and you can make designs and let's say screens faster. Even like apps and websites, apps, if you're using any of the existing design systems out there, example, uh, Material by Google, Carbon by IBM, Polaris by Shopify, if you're using any of these, right, you don't have to code it from scratch. So these are existing libraries, so they have the entire, I'll just show you 1 second. So let's see, go to components and let's look at a button. This is the Carbon's documentation. So what a button looks like and what the code is in React, Angular, Vue, all of this information is readily given to you. You do not have to design this from scratch. So if you are an engineer and you're trying to build, let's say, an app or a website, web app of sorts, you can directly use components and the guidelines from these design systems. You don't need to have a designer I mean, it still has to have a UX designer, but you don't have to design from scratch, is what I'm saying. And especially if you are looking to work into this thing, UX design, this really helps because in India, there are two major sets of companies. One is companies who are startups and are smaller, and what they tend to do is they generally either have their own design systems which they make from scratch. So it's good to have knowledge about design systems beforehand, or they use one of the big design systems out there like these. So big companies generally they tend to put their entire design system open source, and like they keep on updating it. So what smaller companies generally do is either they take it from the bigger companies or they create their own. Whereas MNCs to definitely have their own design system. Sometimes it's private, sometimes it's public. But the thing is, if you have worked with a design system, it gives you high credibility in any uh, I think fresher interview you would have, because this is essentially how they create apps and interfaces right now in the industry. So as both engineers and designers, it is very important that you care about how design systems work, because it saves time for you in your projects. You don't have to waste time in like making a calendar component and all that. You can, or what a table should look like, things like that. You don't have to waste time on that. You can just call in the components from the library and it will render. It's as simple as that. For designers also it's even better, because these libraries are available on any design platform like XD, Figma, and it is just it's basically a drag and drop experience from there, and that itself is something really cool. So yeah, so until this point, anyone has any questions specifically? Like, if anyone has, just you can ask in the chat or to Adib about what I've just talked about design systems, or anything before that I talked about. Any questions if anyone has? I will take that as a no. So I'll continue. All right. So let's go to the next part, which is something
All
that
right, yeah.
yes, yes.
Yeah, I'm still asking them. There are a few questions. I'll like come back in a minute. I'll just ask every question and come back.
Sure. Yeah.
Oh, okay, sure. So just give me 5 minutes. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Jehad, one of the questions is Figma a design system?
No. So Figma is a tool, essentially like any other tool out there. It's a tool where you can design prototypes, make UI frames, and right now they have more things like FigJam, and I won't go into detail, but the idea being a design system is a set of rules, such as like what colors to use, what fonts to use. This is already defined and they are specific to a company or a product. For Figma has their own design system, of course, within their company, but Figma is a tool that anyone can use to create design systems, I would say. So if that, so similar to that, sorry, I is someone speaking?
Oh, no, no, Jehad, continue.
Yeah, similar to that, Adobe XD and we have InVision, we have Marvel. There are many platforms out there who do the essentially the same thing, which is a design tool to create interfaces, and Figma is one of them.
Yeah, Jihad, another question is like regarding the design systems. They're asking if that is like the standard, like is that how you're supposed to build every website? Or like is it like only for the specific companies or something like that?
All right. So, okay, when to use a design system is also very important to understand. So, supposing, let's say you have a project to work on, right? A final year project you're working on. And here, I wouldn't say it's necessary to create a design system. Why? Because you won't reuse it really, right? I mean, once your project is done, once you get your marks, you're not going to use it anywhere else. A design system is especially important when you are, let's say, a startup and you're planning multiple products, or if you are so this is when to design a design system I'm talking about. So when to create a design system is when I would say like you feel that you are going to make multiple things out of the same components, then it makes sense. But like small time projects or like a normal website you're making, doesn't make sense to go through the entire process of making a design system for that. But on the other hand, the good part is, if you're using a one-off project where you have something small to design, you try to use existing open source design systems, something like, as I said, Material by Google or Fluent by Microsoft. What this allows you to do is, you can like save time in that part where you create a button, the front end, the HTML CSS part, which you normally spend a lot of time in. All that part essentially becomes super easy, and the important part, which is the functionality, the back end, is where you can focus on. So I would say, in cases where you are making small projects, try to use existing design systems. But if you're planning to create one, you should see whether you're going to reuse it. The whole point of a design system is that you will reuse this again and again. And in big companies, that's very much important, right? Because they don't want to create everything from scratch again and again. So that's why they have design systems in place. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, Jihad, another question is regarding the color blindness that you spoke of. The
Mhm.
colors that we like taken, like the colors which we find appealing, and like the people who are like color blinded. So if you're building an app, they're asking if there's any specific course you have to take in order to design for the colorblind people, or like because they're confused. Like if you design for colorblind people, it won't be appealing to the normal people with proper eyesight. So that was his question.
Yeah. So there are, as I told before, there is an aspect where you can't cover the whole aspect of it, right? Like, you can't cover everyone. When you're doing accessibility, you have to try to help as many people as you can, but at some point you have to put a limit to it, right? There is this thing known as WCAG. So I'm just googling in front of you guys. So it is, you get it's web content accessibility guidelines. What I'm basically, you get plugins which allow you to check the score on each website or app or everything, and they give you things as to where contrast and everything should, it's if it is not matching, the contrast or the text size is not matching, this WCAG will help you identify those, and it will recommend changes. So I would recommend checking this out. But I do get the fact that you can't completely make everything accessible. So generally, what big companies do is they keep like a mode. So you know how we have light mode and dark mode in our apps and all nowadays, right? They keep an accessibility mode. And but it would generally, like, when you're making apps, you just have to see who's the end person, right? Because consider this, if you're a company like Google, right, you have billions of users. Billions of users, 10% is a big number, right? 10% who can't use it properly. But if you have, let's say, 1000 people using the platform, and 10% can use it, that's around 100 people. For you right now, it's fine, right? That 100 out of, like, you still have 900 people who can perfectly use the platform properly. So that's the math you have to kind of like play around with to understand. Hope again that answers.
Yeah, Jihad, that's all for the question, bro.
All right. So I'll move forward. And the next part of it is pretty interesting, which is the dark side of UX. And when I say the dark side, I specifically mean the evil side, because I'll be explaining how essentially companies and as people like me, as UX designers, use like non-conventional techniques to do stuff. So I'll kind of explain when this thing. So there are two concepts which I want to explain over here. That, see, the whole point till now when we were discussing UX, the idea was it should be pretty, it should be easy to use, it should it should be useful for the user. There's always a positive side to it. But UX is essentially a science and an art. So there are techniques which work that not are not always good but then they do work. And I'll be explaining what these are. The first one is called dark UX patterns. And dark UX patterns are essentially, these can be in the term of copy. They copy, when I say it means text, it can be termed like the UI might be designed in a way that it will nudge a negative emotion in you that will kind of uh, might drive you to do something that you may not have wanted to do, or they might mislead you openly. So these dark UX patterns are actually used a lot in the industry. Bigger companies tend not to use it so much because they already have the level of trust with the users, right? But new and upcoming like startups, especially in India, tend to use this a lot. Example, like right now, you see a Modalo here, right? Which says sign up, get coupon or something. But the idea here is, if you see the secondary button, which is uh, the one below the yellow button, it says, no, I like paying full price, which is a negative. So it's what I'm trying to do is put a guilty emotion in you, that you are, I'm telling you that, see, here's a 10% coupon, give me your email, I want your data. If you decide to say no, you have to click a button that says, no, I want to pay full price. So it's a negative emotion I'm putting on you. And so this is a very small example of a dark UX pattern where we try to kind of guilt people, or I would say in this example, we are guilting people into kind of, we're giving them a negative emotion to try to, some people might look at this, be like, no, 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 I want that 10%. After reading the no, I like paying full price, right? So that is a negative, a dark UX pattern. So another example, because all of you use Coursera, so this would be a good example. So Coursera has this thing where they allow you to have a 7-day free trial across the whole platform. What a lot of people don't know is the courses, right? So when you do a 7-day free trial, when you start with the free trial, essentially it's free for 7 days, but then you have to pay. That's the basic concept, right? But they have an option where you can actually audit the courses. And what that essentially means is that you'll never have to enter your credit card details even after a week. Sorry. What that means again is that it is free, just that you won't get the certificate, right? The audit part is hidden very cleverly. Although, so that is also a part of dark UX pattern where you knowingly hide something which you do not want the person to click. So if Coursera had added it next to free trial, like the audit, this thing, everyone would know that there's an audit option, which means Coursera courses you can get for free without, doing the free trial. Because see, a lot of people do not care about the certificates of Coursera, because right now everyone has a Coursera certificate. But the whole point is that some people just want to learn, right, new information. They don't really care about the certificates of Coursera. And in that case, those people just want to access it. And what Coursera here is doing is using a dark UX pattern to hide that option. So this is also an example of dark UX pattern. So dark UX patterns, they mislead users, or they drive a negative emotion to make them do some action which they did not, like they might not have wanted to do, but they kind of push them towards that. So that is essentially dark UX patterns, which is the first part of the dark side of UX. Now the second part, which is a huge dilemma across UX, is known as dopamine as a service. So it's actually a spoof on so we have different, I think if you have in computer science, you might have learned there's a thing called infrastructure as a service, software as a service, SaaS, PaaS. There are many this thing. So dopamine as a service is something that a lot of so before I get into that, we all have this feeling that we are addicted to like social media and everything, right? And that feeling, so the thing is, I know we have this generational thing that our parents say, you guys are always on your phone, you're addicted and all, and we tend to brush it off saying that no, it's just that everything of my this thing is on my phone, that's why it is like that. Also, we have normally answers like that, which is true in a way. But the thing is, what you need to realize is most of social media apps and of the likes are designed to be addictive. There is a whole field called addiction engineering, where using so let's go back to the roots. So I was talking about dopamine as a service, right? So before I talk about addiction engineering, I talk about dopamine. So it is a chemical essentially that is produced by a brain when you do something that it the brain conceives as a good thing. So whenever you have a successful social interaction, let's say you went out with your friends and had dinner or something, or when you just like exercise or any positive thing which the brain thinks is a good thing, it gives you a dose of dopamine, which is essentially rewarding you for that behavior and making you want to do it more. What people don't realize is that same shot of dopamine is what you get when you get a notification, or like when you post something and someone likes it, or someone, let's say, shares it, and you get the notification, right? Like, this person has liked your phone, or these many people are like viewing your this thing. That essentially also gives you a shot of dopamine. And what big social companies tend to do is they have engineers who specialize in addiction engineering. What they try to do is they design when you get the notifications, what kind of notifications you get, in such a way that you get the rush of dopamine every time you get it, and you become more likely to go on the app again and again and again. And so, I mean, a lot of people, you know start like have openly come out in, let's say, phase Meta right now, and other companies. The people have come out saying that this is what they had been doing. And one example you can take off is the ex VP of growth on Facebook. So the whole concept of addiction engineering is a UX based task which they had. But the idea was that people, we send them notifications in certain time intervals, so that they get that dopamine like dopamine this thing, and then they come back to the platform and they kind of eventually get addicted to the platform. So when people like look at you and say you might be addicted to social media, it's not just this thing, which you're saying. That might actually be the case, because a huge part of designing for social UX is designing for addiction. And I would say that most of the Fortune 500 companies, they use this technique, they still use it. And I mean, it works, right? Because half of us are always on our phone. I am on my phone. So I mean, it works, that's why they keep on using it. But a lot of people do not, over time they realize how bad it is. People who are, who are on the other end, who are designing this, and they eventually give up and they are like, no, I don't want to continue this. But the companies, of course, because it gives numbers, it gives money, so they continue this. So this is a very, I would say, a dark side of UX, where essentially, so the whole point is dopamine as a service is the fact that you tend to get we design UX in a way that you get addicted to it. So that is also one dark aspect of UX. So there comes the whole point as a designer. Now, do you use it or not? Because here's the thing: if Fortune 500 companies are doing it, it works. Means they are getting money, right? It works. So, do you do it or not? That is, I mean, left to the individual designers and companies who have. A lot of the designers think that it's not okay. A lot of the designers also think that it's fair game, but it's left up to the designer themselves of what their ethics are about it. But the point being that UX has a lot of push that can affect users, and the whole mentality of the like end user can be changed just by your designs. And so when you talk about UX, right, there is the impact of UX is not just money for a company, but it's also you have a major impact on how it affects your end users and any stakeholders who are there around you. So before I think I'll be jumping into the workshop part of this soon. I know the like transition was very dark too, and now there's not like suddenly workshop. But then from the dark UX patterns, this thing, I mean, it's still a good thing to learn about because you realize like what kind of human emotions are like. So the whole point of UX is trying to understand how humans interact with platforms and products, and it kind of helps to understand this aspect also of it. So before I continue, so this is so the place I'm working at. I mentioned it's called Beacon Stack, and we are hiring design interns. So if any of you are interested, do apply. You can visit our career site, or you can just scan the QR code as shown. So like and it doesn't need to be UX only. If you think you're good at graphic design, video editing, any aspect of design, if you think you are good at it, apply. And we are based out of Bangalore, but we pay like a very good amount. So hope to see some applications there. And I mean, it's an interesting place to work at. By the way, I should mention we are a product based company, and software is product based company, and we are profitable, which is essentially saying we are already break even. But I will stay here for like the screen for another 1 minute, and then I'll push on to the next slide. By the way, at this point also, if you have any questions regarding the dark UX part which I mentioned, you can ask Adib. Adib, are there any questions?
Yeah, there's one guy, he's asking a question. He's asking if you need any experience to be an intern in your company.
No, no, no. Like so that's the thing, we are looking for people who have design stuff, but then if you don't have experience also, as long as you're willing to learn, anyone's welcome about.
That's it for the questions. Yeah.
Yeah, all right. So I'll move on to the next slide because next we have to do the workshop part of it. But essentially that is the end of the talk, where I talked first about what UX is, then design systems specifically, and then dark UX. Now the next part is essentially just we will be trying to make something on Figma. So Adib, do people in the seminar hall have access to the internet or not?
Yeah, we'll give them access to the internet and we'll get back to you. And just give us like 10 minutes, okay? We'll just give
Yeah,
everyone the
yeah,
credentials.
yeah. I'll just keep this open in that case.
Okay, sure, sure. Figma, right? Do you have anything to share? Any file that you want them to like
No, no,
download through Drive?
no, it's
No,
fine.
just like from scratch you're doing, right?
Yeah, from scratch.
Okay, fine. Just give us like 10-15 minutes. We'll just give credentials. You also take a break till then, okay?
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So Figma, as I said before, is a platform. Sorry, a design tool which. Sorry, 1 second. I'll go have some water. All right. So Figma is a design tool that allows you to prototype and create experiences. But right now it has extended to become like a whiteboarding tool, which means that you can draw on it, and like how a whiteboard you can put sticky notes and all, right? You can do all that, but the prototype part is still there. And so generally when you're on Figma, the first thing you need to do to create a design file, so there'll be things called new figjam importing, but you have to create a new file. So this option which you see over here, new design file, you have to click on it. So I am doing that. My audio is on, right? Yeah, audio is on. So you'll enter this empty screen. And when you enter this empty screen, so if you notice there is nothing on my screen right now, that is because I have not added anything. And like a painting or like any to make anything, you need, example, let's say if you want to code, you need a file, right? Or if you want to paint, you want a canvas. So similar that if you're making a UI screen, you need something to do it on, and that is where the options on the top come into play. So this top nav bar, navigation bar, which you see on the top. So the first one is a cursor, which I currently have. The second one is called frame. And when you click on the drop down, which is next to it, you'll see three options: frame, section, slice. For now, we'll use only frame. And when you click on frame, you're on the right side of your screen, you'll notice you have got some frame options. Here you will get things like different phone, tablet, desktop sizes. So the px width and height also will be mentioned on the side. So let's say I want to design something for Mac, right? I can go to desktop. See, they have given MacBook Air, MacBook Pro, 14 inch, 16 inch. So let's say I've selected 16 inch. When I select that, when I click that, I get a canvas, a frame, which allows me, which is of the size of what a MacBook Pro 16 inch would be. And so I'll delete this now using the delete button, select the name and delete it. And I'll do it again just to explain what I just did. So before you start designing, you need a frame or you need a canvas to, put your design on. And to add that canvas, you have to go to this option in the top navbar called frame. You will get a selection on your right side, and this selection will include different phone sizes, different tablet sizes, different desktop sizes. Even they have like social media, so if you want to make an Instagram story, you can do that on Figma without making a prototype and all that. So Figma is essentially a bigger platform than that, but right now we are making something on MacBook Pro. So let's just click on that. The moment I click on this, I get the frame. So first step is done. I have a screen now. Now the second step is I want to add a button. So I want to add a button, and I want to take it to take me from one screen to another screen, like one way button. To do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my screen by clicking on the name. So if you click on the name, you can select the screen. I'll double click it and change the name to screen one. This is not necessary, but it helps in organizing your files. I'll explain why soon. So what I've done is I selected the frame which I added and I renamed it to screen one by double clicking the name of this thing. So screen one, once I have, so right now on the left side, you will notice there is a thing called assets and layers. Assets and layers. So if you click on layers, you'll notice that screen one is there. And the idea here is it's very similar to Photoshop, if you're familiar with it, that anything you add on your screen, the layers will be visible. So what I'm going to do now is create a button, and for that I need a rectangle for the button. So for now, for like 5 seconds I'll pause over here. What you need to do is add a screen and rename it. Once you're done with that, I'll start step two. Adi, just
Can you zoom in a bit, like 100%?
zoom in. Oh, wait, I'll
Is it possible to increase the
Scroll wheel ये करो.
not scroll. I think zoom in. This is the option of the browser itself, right? Let me try. So
No, no,
it's
in Figma only zoom in.
no? Can you could you zoom in the The UI of the Figma.
Figma link,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Browser.
that is not working. That's the thing. It's zooming in Figma itself instead, actually. Wait.
Control plus you do
He's
like,
doing that only.
Yeah, I did Control Shift plus only. Plus
okay.
minus. It's 1 second. Let me see if I can do something else. Hold on.
You need to zoom browser only.
Oh, wait.
Yeah.
Hey Jihad, can you like click on the browser and then try the zoom, not on Figma?
Okay, wait. I'll try that. Control Shift plus minus plus
That
minus.
will just zoom in the Figma.
No. Control Shift plus minus is only zooming out within the screen share. Actually, 1 second. Oh, I have to zoom. Zoom. Would I think browser settings. Hold on. Setting. One second. Oh, the window itself is not huge. No. Adib, so wait.
Fine. हो गया. 1
What
second. Hey, we're back.
Yeah, so were they able to see or like uh,
No, we got disconnected because of some slight technical issues
okay.
with network.
Wait, I'll open this thing again, Figma again.
Okay. Jihad, you're on like on your right side, right on top. You can see 3 dots, right, on up next to update. Can you click on that?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then can you zoom?
Oh, this
Yes.
thing. Okay.
Yes, browser zoom.
Wait, let's create a new design file. So is this visible?
So,
Just check.
guys, is it visible? Guys, last bench. Yes.
Visible, right? So I'll start again from scratch.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So the top black color bar which you see, right? It has all the options for you to add stuff, put simply. And as I said before, if you want to start designing a UI screen, you need a canvas to start it on. And that is what the frame option does. Frame option is this hash symbol which you see over here, right? The one next to the pointer selected. When you hover on it, it should say frame. When you click on that, or when you hover and click on frame also, you get options on your right side. And these can be different type of phones. If you notice, there are different type of tablets, different type of desktop, this thing. And I selected one of them. What it did is it added a canvas on my screen. The blue selected screen which you see, it is a canvas now, which I'm zooming in and out. And I wanted to change the name of this because it's saying MacBook Pro 14-inch one. So I just double click the name either on the layers or on the name. If I double click the name here also, I can change it to screen one. So just till this point, everyone, if they are done, just let me know, Adib. I will take that as a yes.
Yeah, Jed, you can continue.
Continue, right? All right. So
Yeah.
let's do one more thing. We want a second screen, right? But before we add a second screen, let's add a button. So to add a button, you need to first select the screen one. So it should be highlighted in the blue color as you see when you select the first frame or first canvas. And the first option, if you notice over here, was the frame thing, right? Which is the canvas, the hash symbol. The next one, it's rectangular. And if you click the drop down, you'll see options of rectangular, line, arrow, ellipse, polygon, etc. So you can actually just select rectangle and start drawing. So it's basically like very similar to how Paint was there. If I've used Paint before, like the MS Paint Purana wala. So you have different shapes and you can draw all these shapes. You can add images. But right now, what I've done is I've added a rectangle. So I've selected rectangle and I'll just delete this and show again. Select rectangle and I drag on my screen. I've gotten a rectangle. Now, once I got my rectangle, I want to make this into a button. So now the next part is very important. So pay close attention. So when I zoom in, so I'm zooming into the rectangle. When I click on it on my left side, so when I initially don't click on it, I have three things over here. If you notice, right? Design, prototype, and inspect on the top left. Design, prototype, and inspect. Prototype, you should ignore it now. But what we are going to look at now is what happens to this left right side when you click on the rectangle. When I click on the rectangle, it tells me some values. So if I tell like x value is this much, y value is this much. So it is a Cartesian xy point. Cartesian plane, I mean, all of you are engineers, so I'm assuming you guys know what is Cartesian plane on a this thing, on a flat surface. X comma y values are given over here. Width and height are a width and height in px of the rectangle. And if you notice, there are two more values over here. One is a rotation. So if I increase rotation, right, let's say, if you notice, my rectangle will turn. It is a very basic this thing. And finally, we have border radius, which is essentially if I increase this. Now, this is what you have to do. Once you draw a rectangle, increase the border radius until like the edges become smooth like this. So I increase it to 60 and now I have a smooth this thing. So I drew a rectangle, I dragged it to the center, I increase the border radius. And so if you see the other properties, let's go to the other properties and check out what is there. You have stuff like fill color, effect, stroke. So stroke, I'll explain, is the outside border. Right now we don't have a stroke color, so you don't see a border around this. But fill color, you see, fill means the color inside basically. So it is gray over here. D9, D9, D9 is gray and it's in gray color. So if I want to change the color of the button, right, I have to change the fill color to, let's say, I want to change it to blue. And done. So I brought in a rectangle, I changed the corner radius and I changed the color of it. Finally, I want to add some text to it to make it look like a button. That is where your this option comes in. On the top bar, again, I told you the top bar is used for adding stuff, right? So rectangle, so shapes are there in the rectangle one. T is essentially for text. So I click on T and I click between the rectangle and I start typing. So let's say I type something like click here. All right. And after clicking click here, I increase the size to, so now I'll explain what just happened. I clicked on T, I clicked on one place, it gave me a text, this thing prompt. So I'll show you that again. It gave me a text prompt where I can add anything. I did that. I typed click here and it came. Now when you, so similarly when you selected the rectangle, right, you got blue color, you got these values. Similarly when you select the text, right, you'll get different properties, where you'll get properties about the text on the right side, which is like the font. You can change it, you can change the, you can make it more bold or semi bold, or you can change the font size. And so like alignment, there are multiple options over here, but essentially font options are available in here under text. Again here, if I want to change the color, I can change the color of fill, similar to how I changed before, but I like the white on blue color, so I'll leave it here. So till this point, if everyone's done, just let me know. Adi, if they are done with this step, just let me know. I'll continue.
Yeah, sure, sure. Just give me a minute, okay? I'll just check everyone's. Yeah, just continue, continue.
Yeah. So now once you're done with this, we are going to duplicate this entire screen. So when you look at the layers, right, you'll see that screen one, click here, rectangle one is there. And you see, notice that click here and rectangle one are under screen one. So what I'm going to do is click on screen one, either from the layers panel or from here. And I'll do command or control D, which creates a duplicate. Screen one, it creates screen two. From screen one, screen two, it creates. So it creates a duplicate. Just select this and do control D. Or if you want, you can do right click, and it also has an option over here, if I'm not wrong. Where is it? Duplicate. Flatten. Wait, duplicate is not here. I think control D is this thing. So once you're done with duplicate, let's change some values in the second one to differentiate it. So when I select the screen, one thing you might have noticed is screen also has screen 2 and screen 1 have their own field color here on the right side. If you notice, they have FFF, which is white. So let's change that for screen 2 and make it something other than white. And I have made it blue. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the color of the button. So the button is still there actually. It's just that the background color also have changed it to blue. The rectangle color or the button color, I will change it to something different. So in this case, I'll make it dark blue. So what I've done is I have duplicated this, changed the fill color of the screen, and then the rectangle again. Once you're done with this, the next step is doing essentially your first prototype. But then before that, the duplicate part, if anyone has any questions, do let Adib or me know. Sorry.
No, no, just continue.
Continue. Okay. The next part. So this is the first part. Let's say you design your screens. Second part is the prototyping. You want to add some level of interaction. To do that, what you're going to do is So there are three headings over here. On the right side, top, below the black bar, you'll notice design, prototype, and inspect. Click on prototype. Once you click on prototype, you can, when you hover over any item, right, like this, you'll notice there is some like a circular. So if you notice at the end of the button, there's a circular this thing now, right? It was not there before. When you are in design mode, when I click on design and I do that, that is not there. When I click on prototype, that plus thing appears when I go over that circle. So what you need to do is click on plus and drag out this wire. It's essentially a user flow arrow. We are dragging out the arrow and we are pointing at to screen 2. When I do this and when I leave it at screen 2, it creates an interaction. And what the interaction is, so it creates this automatically, but it's very simple when you read it. On click, navigate to screen 2. That means if I click this blue rectangle, it takes me to screen 2. And once I do this and then go back to design, I won't see that. But if I go back to prototype, you'll see the arrow is still there. So when you click this, you'll see the arrow is there. So once you make this arrow, to test out your prototype, you need to click play. So play is actually in the top black bar here. Next to share, it'll be play, that play button. I'm playing the prototype, and when I play, so first thing you notice is they have added a laptop around it. The reason being, what was the frame I had selected initially? I had selected MacBook 14 inch, right? Because of that, they have added a MacBook 14 inch to show what will it look like. And if I now go over this and I click anywhere else, so I just click on the white screen anywhere, nothing happens. But it does highlight lightly. If you see, the color has changed of click here. What it's doing is telling me to click here. And when I click here, it takes me to the second screen. And so what if you wanted to go back? Now, if I want to go back, I can't do it from here. So I'll go back to my design. Similarly, go over, make sure you're in the prototype mode, not in design. Prototype, go over the rectangle, select the plus, drag out the arrow, point it at which screen you want it to go. And again, it will add the, by default, you'll add the interaction, which you can edit, by the way. So there are options like on drag, while hover, while pressing, but for now we are doing on click. That is by default whatever is there. When you add the interaction back, then it becomes a two-way interaction, where if I click here, I'll go here, screen 1. If I click again, I go to screen 2. So I'll wait for you guys to finish this step, because I think if there are any confusions in understanding how the prototype thing works, you can let us know. But essentially, that is how you add interaction to your designs. So I could add like multiple screens and I can have interaction between them using this. Are they this thing?
They're still doing it, Jihad.
Yeah.
Okay.
By the way, if you have doubts, you can ask anytime, all right, about what I just did. I made a duplicate of this, changed the colors, went to prototype mode, and just added the interaction between the two buttons. One button from here, one interaction from here. So that resulted in this. When I click on screen 2, I go to screen 1. When I click on screen 1, I go to screen 2. And I can just keep on doing that. Are they done?
Yeah, Jayad, continue.
All right. So you understood how to add elements to the screen. You understood how to add interaction. Now, the next thing I'm going to explain is a bit different, and it is to understand how to make components. So, look closely what I'm going to do. So, I have the button text over here and the rectangle I drew over here. I'm going to select both. Okay. I'm gonna drag it outside my screen. When I do that, if you notice on the layer side, on the left side, it shows that it has come out. It is no longer under the screen one, it is outside. These two over here on the left side. When I do that, now what I'm trying to do is I'm gonna make this into a component. I'll explain the usage of the component, how it is useful. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna select both of it. I'm gonna right click, create component. So there is this right click, create component. And when you do that, you have, it turns purple. Actually, if you notice, it turns purple. Even on the this side, it turns purple. I'll change the name of the component to button. Now I'll explain the cool part of this. Once you do this, once you create a when you drag it out and you have named it as a component, right? And then if you go to, so like here you switch between design and prototype, right? Here you can switch between layers and assets. So if you click on assets, now there'll be a button over here. And the best part is you don't have to click, like make any more button, like multiple buttons. You can just drag it out like this. And the best part is if I edit, if I'm not wrong, if I edit this, it changes everywhere. What is happening is it's very similar like a function in coding, where if I create a user defined component and then I like essentially drag it out, all of the instances where I call it will reflect that change. This is very important because if you have used, let's say, a button color in like 10 screens, you don't have to go to each screen to change the button color. You can change it in one place, it'll change for everyone. So let's go back to the original blue and I'll delete these ones which I've added on the screen. So this is the purple one is the original one, the one which I've added over here. So that's the first thing. First step is try to make a component of your own. And second thing I'm going to teach is making a variation. A variation is, imagine you have one more type of button, but you don't want to like spoil it in a way that there are like 10 buttons over here now, because you might have the different types of buttons. Like this might be primary, you might want a secondary button. So when you click on a component, right, you can actually add properties, or you can also add this thing. I'll just, so when you click on add properties, they'll show a concept called variant. So I'll explain how to do this. Once you create a component, which is essentially I dragged it out, I turned it into create component, I changed the name. That much once you have done, when you select this and you add a property, property will be available on your right side. There are options like Boolean, instant swap, and text, but go with the first one, variant. What it does is it allows you to have a variant of your button, like a different type of button within the same component. So I did that and it added, so it shows one variant over here, but if there's a plus button which will appear. And when I click on that, every time I click, a new variant comes. And then each variant has its name. So here is the default one. If I click this one, it shows variant 2. If I click this one, shows variant 3. Now I'll explain what is the usage of this. Let's say I want to change the look of this. Remember I was talking about stroke color. We'll add that. I'm adding I'm press plus and I change the color to dark blue and I remove. So minus is remove, plus is add. I remove the fill. So if you notice, I have a button which has a border but has no inside color. And I can increase the width of this thing. And let's say I change the color of text also along with that. So now I have a button which is essentially like a secondary button, and I can name it also. So I told you there are variants, right? So initial one is default. Second one, I can rename it as secondary. And third one, let's say we want it to be a ghost button, which is essentially a button without the rectangle. So I'll change the color of this to blue. Delete this. Wait, not delete this. Sorry. Remove this. So when I do minus to the fill, it gets removed. So this is a ghost button. So I'll name it that. So I'll explain what I did over here. Once you have a component made, so let's say I'll go through the process with this button again. I can either drag this whole thing or duplicate it and bring it out. Once you do that, right click, make it a component. Then I added a variant. So it shows that it has one variant, which is the default. So there's this plus button. I click on the plus button and create a few variants, change a few things in that. So I change this variant's color, this variant text color I'll change. So what happens is now I have two buttons because I have two components, button and component one. But if I drag this here, I have this option called properties, and I can switch between these three with a single component. So I can simply just I can create fast UI like this without designing these again and again. So that is essentially what companies do. And even if you're working on a project, this helps because later, let's say you're changing anything, just change in the source, it changes for all your screens at once. So let's say I'm doing this for the other one. I created like this variations. If you notice, variant 2 is this, variant 3 is this. So just try this out where you have different variations of the same components. I know it's a bit complex than normal, the initial prototype thing, but this is something really powerful because then you can manage your uh, entire component library or components which you have in your UI separately. So I'll explain what big companies do now. For example, like in our company, our design system is called Kaizen. Similarly, I have saved already, let's say button. Let's go to button. 1 second. I have saved what all buttons look like. Like these many variations I have with icon, with icon on the right side, without background, with background, danger ones, like blue color, secondary one. So I have multiple variations, and all of these variations later when I use them, right? So when I use my assets, I just have to call in like button, and I can change the variation as needed. So I can add like, let's say it's danger, so I can just make it red like that. Or if I want to say it's not filled, it's stroke, which is the outline thing, I can do that. So you can add properties, you can have multiple states of a single component, and that's how companies manage like multiple types. And the best part of this is all of this is now reusable. And if I change in this design file, no, wherever I have used this button, that color will change. And so I understand like I jumped a lot of this thing over here while explaining this. If you have any doubts, you can let me know. But here's the thing, if you are really keen about learning Figma, I would recommend checking out Figma's YouTube channel. Actually, they have this thing. Wait. All right. Wait, hold on. Wait, it's called 1 second. Figma for Office. It's called, wait 1 second. Yeah, so there's this playlist called Office Hours in Figma's YouTube channel. I recommend so it has 25 videos, but if you watch at least 50% of the videos, like 12 videos also you watch, you will know more about Figma than some of the designers in my company, I would say. Because this is very powerful. They teach you everything from scratch. And the best part is all of this is free out there in Figma's YouTube channel. And they explain it very nicely because obviously they have built it. And it's very cool to learn all this. But right now, if you have any doubts about what I did over here, you can let me know. Adip?
Yes, Jihad.
They call Adib.
I think everyone's up to mark.
Yeah. Should I stop? Like, I think I'm done with the session.
Done. They don't have questions.
All right. So it was nice sharing this with you. Again, if you have any UX regarding questions about the career path and everything, anything specific, I'll type my ID over here. It's Instagram. You can directly just DM me, ask any questions you have about picking up design as a career. I would say one thing that UX and product design do pay on an average. On an average, they do pay more than engineering. So, but again, there are people who don't get paid because of certain reasons. But when it comes to like our college placements, definitely more than that. I'll tell you that much. So it's a if you're looking for the money side of it, it is a very good career path according to me. But if you have any other questions, like whether about the career or about different types of design and how to get started in that, you can also ask me that. Also, if you have questions about the internship program, which I mentioned earlier on, uh, you can ask in the same this thing. So that's it, Adib, I think, from my end.